Chaponda here, Deliso Chaponda here. If you're tuning in for the first time, this is a stand-up comedy show where I, Deliso Chaponda, a stand-up comedian, usually would be performing to lots of people. But because of Corona, I have no audience. So what I do instead is I just do this broadcast where I do stand-up comedy to you, whoever may be tuning in wherever you are. So I see that I have a few people on. This is me fiddling around with the technology. Okay, I have a few people on Facebook. Hello, people on Facebook. I have a few people on YouTube. Hello, everybody. The show will start in around 30 seconds. Today's episode is on the subject of crying. I'll be talking about crying. So if that sounds interesting to you, just sit down and enjoy. If you've got any friends who you think cry too much or don't cry enough, please hit share so that they can join this little discussion of crying that's going to happen. For anybody whose first time it is here, some of the shows I do just jokes about random subjects, which are suggested by audience members. And then the other times I do things like what I'm doing today, which is a deep dive, right? A deep dive on themes that I feel are pertinent to this time, right? So first of all, can I say anybody who sees me, please just put a message just so that I know that I am broadcasting. And as soon as I know that there are a few people in the room, I will begin. Hello, Sharon Nichols. Anybody from YouTube, if you see me, please put a comment. Then we will get started. Might as well just get started. Thank you, Jennifer Calaby. Thank you for enjoying me on Britain's Got Talent. Okay, let's get down. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, today's episode is a deep dive on the subject of crying. Why crying? Well, actually, funny thing happened yesterday, right? So, I'm somebody who I've not cried since I was 11 years old, right? I blocked it out. Look, we don't need to go into it that much because this is going to be a comedy show. We don't want to turn it into therapy. But I had bad things happen to me. I was a kid who was often bullied and had terrible things happen to me. Some of them unspeakable things happened to me when I was a kid. Hey, every superhero needs an origin story, right? Anyway, so I had bad things happen to me. And when I was around 11, 12, I remember I had enough because I often felt when they were beating me up that me crying was letting them win, right? So I decided I'm never gonna cry again. And it took quite a few times. But the last time I remember crying was in the age of 12. I was in Form 2 in Swaziland. I was just outside Ekukuleni and I'd just been beaten up. And that was the last time I remember crying. But anyway, since then, I've not cried. I had no problem with it. I felt it was fine. But then as I got older, I sometimes wondered if there was something wrong with me, right? Because crying is a very healthy thing to do. And as I became an adult and I found out about how, people who repress things aren't fully functioning members of society, I started to feel bad. Like, I can't cry. I want to cry. Yesterday night, I was watching Judy. Like, Judy Garland did a special. Now, there are a lot of people commenting, by the way. Just so you know, when we reach the interval, I will stop and I will respond to your comments, right? So the first section of this show, let me just explain. So yesterday, I watched Judy Garland, the very brilliant biopic starring Renee Zellweger. And there was one scene, I'm not going to spoil the movie, but if you've watched the movie, there's a scene which is the Over the Rainbow scene, right? And there was a moment in it where I felt myself like welling up, like I could cry. And I was like, yes, I'm going to cry. First time since I was 12. And then I just couldn't cry, right? I couldn't cry. So I rewinded it. And then I watched the scene again. I was like, come on. It didn't happen. But I was like, I want to cry. So I just started Googling things which make you cry. So I watched the end of Shawshank Redemption, right? I was watching the scene where, a certain character dies of cancer. I watched the final scene of Schindler's List. I was like, come on, tears. It didn't happen. I didn't manage to cry, but it was such a funny quest that I was on that it got me thinking about crying, and I decided today to do an episode on crying, right? So what I'm going to do is in the first half of the show, I am going to talk about, I put a call out to people who are my fans, and I said, if you're somebody who either, like me, has not cried in years, or if you're someone who cries all the time, do you mind having a chat with me, right? And wonderfully, 5 people answered, had 5 wonderful conversations with people, and I'm going to go through all these 5 in the first half. I've named them, Don't Make Me Hungry, You Won't Like Me When I'm Hungry, Anger Management, Gay Supermodel, The Real Thing, and Rehab. I said no, no, no. So that'll be the first half of the show. Then we'll have a little interval where I'll talk in the chats. Also, if you really want me to comment on your what you put in the chat, anything which is about crying, I'll be more likely to look into. So ask yourself the kind of questions which I was asking these people. Do you cry a lot? When is it okay to cry? When is it okay to cry? Anything to do with crying, I'll be more drawn to, but I'll answer whatever questions you want in the little interval, right? And then the second half is just a bunch of funny jokes which I wrote about movies that make people cry and things like that. So, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so as I said, I spoke to 5 people. Now, I will admit, before I even get to this, that I have to admit that I am somebody who often I look down on people crying. I'll admit it. I know I don't cry and I want to cry, but sometimes I judge people for crying, right? I'm like, get a hold of yourself, right? Like, for example, when I did Britain's Got Talent, right? When I had my amazing moment, I was really happy and I didn't cry. And I remember when a friend of mine did it and did really well and he started crying, I remember thinking, get a grip, my man! Like, hold yourself together! The world is watching! Right? And I realized this is just like a cultural hang-up which I have, in which often men crying in African Caribbean culture, somebody should have died, right? Legitimately, when it's short of somebody dying, often we judge people. And I know I shouldn't necessarily have reacted like this, but that's how I reacted. I was like, what are you doing, man? Grip! Get a grip! So I'll admit, before I even went into these conversations, I'll admit I have some hang-ups. 1, because I don't cry. 2, because I sometimes judge men who cry. 3, because I feel odd sometimes about women crying in arguments, right? Because, you know, sometimes you're having an argument and then she starts crying and you're like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, you win the argument. You know what I mean? Like, and so I had all these weird hang-ups, but I tried to be open with every one of the conversations. I just wanted to let you know my hang-up before we get the conversations. And they went to some very funny places, so do not worry. This is not going to be an episode which is going to have you crying or wanting to send me, like, you know, like a birthday card or something like that to cheer me up. Do not worry. As always, it went to very, very funny places. Okay, so we're going to start with the first person, who I've labeled, Don't Make Me Hungry, You Won't Like Me When I'm Hungry. Now, this was a wonderful conversation and very surprising, because usually the people who message me are people who know me a bit. Either it's like comedians I've performed with, or it's friends of mine. This person was somebody who is in Malawi, has watched me on YouTube a bunch of times, is a fan, but I've never actually met, right? And it's such an odd thing that she agreed to this, because she just put a comment, I cry all the time, and then she was surprised when I was like, can I ring you up? And I suppose it must be like if I've been watching like a Chris Rock YouTube video, and then he's like, hey, can I give you a call? And I was like, yes, I will. So I'm so thankful to her. I won't say her name. She will just go by the name of Don't Make Me Hungry. Why do I say this? Because I asked a lot of questions. The sort of questions I asked was, when was the last time you cried? What's the strangest reason you've cried? Do you think it's okay when CEUs cry? Also just ask them things about what emotions have made them cry, times they've cried when they wish they couldn't, that sort of thing. I did like a good 5 to 10 minute little interview. And the reason I've labeled this was fascinating to me, because most of the people I spoke to have cried for grief, have cried for happiness, have cried for anger, have cried for horror, all sorts of reasons people cry. She was the only one I knew who said she had cried several times out of hunger. Now, don't know. This isn't like a Malawi is starving thing, people. Don't make that assumption. No. This is very specific to her. Malawi doesn't have loads of starving people just weeping all the time. Don't make that assumption. No. Hers was very specific. And she told me a time when she was in Cape Town. And she'd patiently made herself a little treat. She'd put it in a Tupperware, which she'd put in the shared fridge. And then she came home that night hungry, ready to eat her food from the shared fridge. And when she opened it, somebody had eaten the food from her shared fridge, and she just started weeping. Whoever it was who stole her food, shame on you. So hunger is one thing that made her cry, okay? She also said that she cries often in movies, because she was somebody who said she cries all the time. She cries for hunger, she cried in happy moments, she cries for sad moments. She said last movie she remembers crying in was a romantic movie called 5 Feet Apart, which is about people who, because they've got a connection, they can't touch each other. So they've got to be 5 feet apart. And she watched this before Corona. She was getting ready. I don't know how. She somehow knew, like a soothsayer, that there's some point where we're not going to be able to touch each other. But she watched this movie where the hero and the heroine couldn't touch each other. I've not watched this movie. I might check it out because this is the world we're all living in. Now, I also asked her about times when she regretted crying, right? And she gave me a wonderful answer. She said that actually when she was younger, when she was in her 20s, there were many times she felt bad because she would cry at work. You know, she should just well up and she would weep at work, and she felt she was being unprofessional. She'd feel awkward. But this is interesting. She's in her 30s now, and now she says, I don't care, right? I like crying. It feels good to cry. It helps me to cry. I don't care where I am. I don't care if I'm at work. I will cry. And I've got to admire it, because I've got to admit, I always thought it must be weird in business situations, right? And I always thought, like, imagine a CEO crying. Could you imagine when it's the monthly meeting and the CEO comes on and says, okay, so we've had a loss in profits this year, and oh my God, we've had a difficult fall, my people. We're gonna have to lay off some people. I just couldn't see it, right? I couldn't see it being appropriate in a business setting, but these are my own hang-ups. She's right. If crying helps, maybe it would be better. In fact, maybe it would humanize, right, all of the people in power. In fact, 2 of the people who I interviewed, not her, but 2 of the British people I spoke about, Prime Minister Theresa May, who was the Prime Minister before Boris Johnson. And when she was resigning, she was crying, right? And these 2 people were people who did not like her. They did not like her policies, but they said in that moment she was weeping. They felt a human connection. And so there's a level where maybe crying works, and maybe we need people in power to cry. But one of them also added, though, it has to be somebody they really don't hate, right? If they don't like your policies, but they're okay. But if they hate you, they might just laugh at you crying. But anyway, let's get back to my hungry friend, right? I asked her a very cheeky question, which I can't believe I asked this to a woman I've never met before, but I was on the phone. So I also asked her if she ever cries during sex, right? And she said, oh yes, lots of times, right? Lots of times. And I have been with several women who have cried during sex. I don't know what that says about my technique, right? And she said, look, don't worry. Women, we sometimes cry during sex. It's so overwhelming. And she even said it was usually a good thing, because she'd be so caught up in the moment, the emotions would be too much, and she would just start weeping. However, any of you who are feeling proud because you made a woman cry, that means you're good in bed. She said, no. A lot of times it's such a positive thing. There was one time she cried because the person she was in bed with was so bad. He was so bad that it made her weep at her life choices. So you don't know if you're making her cry because you're so good, she's got emotional, or you're so bad, she's just weeping and wishing she did not go out. So men, we're just as lost as we always were. And that pretty much was my whole discussion with her. We talked about all sorts of things, but those are the ones I thought to bring up. So thank you so much for speaking to me, the hungry lady in Malawi. And next time I'm in Malawi, I owe you some food. Okay. The second person I spoke to, right? The second person I spoke to was a comedian, right? It was a friend of mine, a comedian, very funny comedian, right? And we had a chat, and he surprised me in that, because I asked people about, do they cry with happiness? Do they cry with sadness? All the different emotions. And he said that the main thing that makes him cry is anger, right? Anger crying, right? And he's almost like the real human version of the Incredible Hulk, right? Because he said early on in his life, he would cry when he was angry, and then he would black out. He wouldn't remember what he did. And in his weeping, he would attack people, right? He would attack people. He said there were times when, he started crying, then he doesn't know what happened, but he knows he beat someone up. He choked them, right? And that must be so confusing when this person has attacked you, is pounding you, but they're weeping while they're doing it. You're like, what the hell is going on? And he has changed a lot, right? He's changed a lot. When he was younger, he was like a hot-headed person, and he found ways to manage it. Like he found ways to manage it. He spoke to therapists, and he did all sorts of things so that he's not just weeping and attacking all the people who he runs into. So he started doing basketball to vent his anger. In fact, one of his uncles who saw when he'd attacked somebody said, "You need to start boxing." Right? I don't think that helps, uncle. You're just going to make him more efficient at beating people up. But his uncle felt like he needed a vent for these violent tendencies. So again, he did basketball, he did boxing, he did dance, he even got into comedy, right? And he bettered himself by controlling these negative emotions. But as much as I can say that, if I'm ever hanging out with him and I see a tear start rolling out of his eyes, I'm out of there. Right? I don't care what's going on. Like one tear, I'm gonna run, because I would not win a fight with this man. Trust me. He's like a big person. Oh, what else, right? I asked him if he ever had wept during sex. He said, hell no, which is good, because you wouldn't want him to get angry during sex and attack his partner. What else did he say? I asked him if it made him feel better, and he actually said that crying did make him feel better. It was an outlet which let him feel better afterwards. Now, he wasn't necessarily talking about the anger crying, because he also said there've been a few moments where something really tragic has happened where he's also cried, but generally it's because of anger. So that was the angry man, angry comedian. So just a warning, I'm not going to reveal who he is in case he's not comfortable, but if you're ever around a comedian and you see an eye start rolling out a tear, run! Run like you're Black Widow in the scene in Avengers when Hulk started chasing her, because trust me, man can switch. Third person, right? Third person is the person who I'm going to call the gay supermodel, right? First of all, I need to tell you, this is a friend of mine who I went to high school, who I think he's funnier than me. Right, because I had a conversation with this man and I just kept bursting out laughing. Why do I call him the gay supermodel? Because the proviso I told everybody was, I said, look, I'm going to talk about you guys on my show, but don't worry, I'm going to make it anonymous and I'm going to give you an alias. And he said, if you talk about me with an alias, just make me more attractive and thinner than I am. So I've got to tell you, actually, I don't even know why he asked me this, because this man is a beautiful human being. He's like an Adonis. He's the most attractive person I've ever met, right? I mean, I'm on the other team, but I would switch for him because he is so beautiful, right? He's a gay supermodel, right? But he's hilarious. And he was told, I asked him these questions, and his answers, I'm not even going to add the jokes. I'm just going to tell you his answers. Things like, I asked him, have you ever cried during sex? And he said, only if they're really, really big. And he said that usually the crying just came before he yelled out his safe word. So he's a very funny guy. But amidst all the silly jokes we're telling, he said some really touching things, right? He said, one, he rarely cries, right? He rarely cries. But when he does cry, he cries for hours. It just pours out when he cries. So he rarely cries, and then he cries loads. So he stores it up, and then it all comes up. And I kind of think that with the coronavirus, That's going to happen with a lot of us, right? Because think about it. I have not touched a human being in around 3 weeks, right? I've not touched a single human being in 3 weeks. I think as soon as they declare a vaccine or they say that lockdown is over, I'm just going to go outside and just be like, it'll be like I'm a blind person just touching everybody, trying to see what they feel like. Somebody, I'll be hugging strangers saying, isn't this beautiful? I can hug everybody. I'm going to go crazy. Also, maybe too personal, but like, again, I haven't touched a human being in 3 weeks, so I haven't had sex in weeks. It's pent up. I pity the first woman I have sex with once the lockdown is over. She could fly across the room. It'll be like a volcanic eruption. Oh my God. I'm telling you, man. There's going to be danger zone when it enters. So, as I said, he said that he rarely cries, but when he does cry, he'd make up for lost time and it would just pour out of him. Fountains of tears, like all sorts of weeping, right? And then one of the sweetest things he did say was, I talked to him about times when he really cried, and he said, so he adopted, him and his partner, they adopted a little boy, and when the adoption came through and he found out that they were allowed to adopt the child, and he met the child who's now his son, he wept, and that was very beautiful, very beautiful. So thank you so much, gay supermodel, for taking the time to talk to me. Okay, the fourth person I spoke to is a friend of mine. I spoke to a friend of mine, and it was a wonderful chat we had. She's someone who's somewhere in the middle, because I asked for people who cry all the time, and I asked for people who rarely cry. She's somewhere in between, in that she cries, but there's not really a pattern to it. Like sometimes she'll cry a lot, and sometimes it'll be a long time since she last cried. And she said with her, it has to be a surprise. It's usually a surprise, right? So if she's watching a movie where she knows it's going to be sad, she's not likely to cry. But if a sad moment just comes out of nowhere in the middle of a comedy, bam, gotcha, right? Similarly, it's when she's surprised by happiness. That's when she'll usually cry, right? So things like when she was getting married, right, on her wedding day, she was really happy and she was loving the day and she wasn't necessarily going to cry with happiness. But then when she saw her husband, right, the person who she was marrying, welling up, and saw that he had tears in his eyes, she was so surprised that him, who's someone who doesn't show that much emotion, but he was so caught up in it, he was crying, was that then she started crying, right? So she had this surprise delight that it was affecting him that way. So I realized, like, for her it has to be a surprise. And then what else? She said that she cried in movies. She does cry in movies, and it's she cries in when Bambi, what happened to Bambi's mom. I'm going to talk about a bunch of movies, so I don't want to give away all the spoilers, but it's kind of tough not to. But I assume we all know what happened to Bambi's mom, right? That made her cry, because again, that's a surprise. She cried during Grey's Anatomy, right? A surprise thing which happened. I've not watched it, but so she cries in movies. What else? I asked her when she wishes that she didn't cry. And this is very interesting, because she said she wishes sometimes she didn't cry during arguments, because when she cries, sometimes it makes the person stop arguing. Because, look, I've been in that situation. You're having an argument with someone. You are like, maybe even if it's something unemotional, like you're discussing the existence of God, right? You're going back and forth, giving your points, gets heated. You say something a little too far. They start weeping, right? You stop arguing, right? You apologize. You put your arms around them. You try to cheer them up. Sometimes you even give up your side, right? You're like, oh, I'm sorry, you know, right? And she feels like sometimes that's a little bit manipulative, and I actually disagree with her, because I've been around her when she cried. I don't think she necessarily could control it, but I understand what she's saying. She doesn't like the idea that she's manipulating this person to give up their side of the argument. And so now when she's in an argument, if she feels a cry coming on, she tries to control it until later, until it's over and both of them have said what they've had to say, which I think is really interesting. And I think it's very important to her, above all things, that things are genuine. This is why I called her the real thing. She's all about it being genuine, right? When I talked to her about if it's okay for a CEO or a politician to cry in her eyes, she said only if it's genuine, right? Because if she believes them, that they are caught up in that moment weeping, and she felt like she actually empathized with Theresa May, who she disagrees with, but she felt in that moment this was just a human being who tried her best, falling apart. She felt empathy. But if she doesn't trust you, if she feels like you're putting it on to get out of trouble, then it's worse. It's worse than if you hadn't cried at all. In fact, she says crocodile tears is the worst. Now, just as an aside, why are fake tears called crocodile tears? What did crocodiles ever do to get this reputation for weeping all the time, right? I've looked at crocodiles, right? I can see them biting people. I can see them swimming. I can see them doing all sorts of things. When did crocodiles start weeping? I don't understand where this comes from. If you know where this disparagement of the pure, innocent crocodile comes from, put it in the comments. We'll deal with it in the break, because I don't understand it, right? Maybe it should be crying parrots tears, because they pretend stuff all the time, not the beloved crocodile. Any final things which I found? Oh yes, one beautiful moment, and this seemed to be a recurring thing. I asked her times when she's cried, and she said that when she saw her child for the first time, but this wasn't actually when a child was born. When at 37 weeks pregnant, she went for a scan, and her child's face was visible in the scan, visible enough that she felt like she could pick him out she could pick him out, because his features were now like not just fetus features, they were his face. And when she saw his face she started to cry. And I thought that too was very beautiful. Now I will say this, I have no kids, right? I have no kids. So I never even have had to consider whether I would cry if I saw my child. But I don't want to have kids, so maybe I will cry when I make someone pregnant. I'll just be like, no, my life will never be the same again. Why did the condom burst? I don't know, but maybe not. Let us move on to the next one. The next one is the last one before the break I want to talk about is rehab. I said, no. Now, this was a short conversation I had once I'd already spoken to these 4 people. And this is a person who I spoke to who's had a very troubled past. He was a drug addict earlier in his life, and he's reformed his life. But he also talks about the fact that he stopped crying, right? He's like me. At a certain point in his life, he felt like crying was giving in, right? And it was that thing where he feels like if you cry when someone has done something bad to you, you've let them win, right? So he just tried to fight against it, bottled up, and now he doesn't cry, right? Doesn't cry. He's like me. And when he was a little kid, before 16, he used to cry all the time. He once thought Saddam Hussein was dropping bombs in the oven. He thought Saddam Hussein was dropping bombs in the ocean to kill the whales. I don't know where this story came from. I don't know if it's true. I don't know where it came from. I never heard that. So he was crying for the fate of the poor whales who were being bombed by Saddam Hussein, right? So he used to cry all the time. But then around 16, last time he cried. And he wishes he did cry, because there were times when he was in rehab, right? This is when he was reforming his life. And he was in rehab with some hardened criminals, right? And in rehab, these hardened criminals who had done like some unspeakable things, they were letting it all out. They were weeping and so on and on. And he couldn't weep, and he wishes he had, because he felt like it would be very cathartic. It would be very healing. It would help him mend and become a better person, but he couldn't cry. But also, he was with hardened criminals. I think if you're like a hardened criminal who has killed like 10 people or something like that, you can cry. Because nobody's making fun of you, right? Because they know you're serious, right? You know that teardrop tattoo people who've killed gets? Maybe it's linked. I don't know. I even remember there was a manga. There's a Chinese manga cartoon called Crying Freeman about an assassin who every time he kills somebody, he cries. Maybe it's my angry friend who punches people. So other things which I discussed with this guy, he said, well, maybe part of the reason he doesn't cry is his father was a very old school bloke, old school guy who was manly in that old school way. And anytime he cried, his dad would be like, don't cry, be a man, be a man. And he felt that masculinity was very tied up to being a man. It's very interesting because nowadays, with words like toxic masculinity, people are looking at it differently. Put in the comments what you think about the idea of a man crying, right? And then the final story I'll bring up, which I think was really quite funny, is he talked to me about, I couldn't ask him about when he cried in bed having sex, because as I said, he's not cried since he was 16, right? But he said he's been in bed with someone who started crying, and this was a one-night stand, and he had instant panic because he was like, oh no, oh no, oh no. He just saw his career ending in that moment. He was like, the hashtag Me Too story is coming out tomorrow. But then actually, she did tell him, he apologized, he comforted her, and he was like, I'm so sorry. And she actually said, no. She was so caught up in how good the sex was that she started crying, right? But I think the funny thing which would happen after that is, if you now know that when you have really good sex with this person, they weep, wouldn't you start every time you have sex and they don't cry, you'd be like, hey, why didn't you cry? Why didn't you cry? What did I do wrong this time? Huh? Is it just not as special as it was for you? So that was the final person I spoke to. Thank you to all 5 people who spoke to me. Before we get to the second half, let me take a look at the commenters. Not the commenters, the comments. Okay, let's go through the comments. So hi to Jennifer, hi to Sharon Nichols, hi to everybody who is in the comments. Hello to Gahizi Shaban, thank you so much. Oh, Jesse and Abby, I'm glad you are laughing. Liam Roderick, I am doing fine, and I don't think I'll get the coronavirus because I'm just in this flat. The only time that I leave this flat is I go for a walk every day, which takes around, I do like a half an hour to an hour walk. I go to my grocery store, and that's pretty much it. The rest of the time, I am within these walls. What else do we have? Let's see. Oh, Silvio Madueke says, glad to see the sit-down shows again. I'm glad. I didn't know if people like the sit-down shows because the stand-up shows got more shares, they got more likes, so I started leaning more into them. But I like kind of doing deep dives of like a kind of talk show more than a stand-up show because it lets me really deep dives in some subjects, right? Joel Susie, every time I'm watching a movie with onions in it, I cry a lot. Very funny, Joel Susie. Mamba, why do I have only 25.7 followers? Because I am not a modern person who utilizes the internet very well. I'm trying, but I feel like people who are my generation, you don't necessarily know how to use it. I'm not on Snapchat. I'm not TikToking away. And I'm trying now that I'm in isolation, in lockdown, to become better at the internet, but I am not yet good at it. So if you want me to get more followers, please share. Please tell people to come tune in because I'm going to be doing this until I am allowed out of this little box. Excellent. Let's do this. Gift Katundu, watching from Wuhan. Wuhan, you may be joking, but if you are watching from Wuhan, stay safe, my man, stay safe. Excellent. Creative Potato, I'm the funniest person. Well, thank you so much for the compliment. Thank you. You like me on Britain's Got Talent. Thank you so much. Oh, I will keep doing what I'm doing until Corona is defeated. And in fact, it's going quite well. I may, even after Corona is gone and I'm out of lockdown, I won't be able to do it every day because I have to make a living and do comedy shows and travel around the country and travel around the world doing comedy shows. But I might even go to doing it once or twice a week at a certain time because I'm really enjoying it. And I've never written so many jokes in my life. I mean, I've got a stat. I've written around 20 minutes of jokes every day for the last 21 days. This is episode 21. I didn't know I had it in me. So it's been a very good process. So I'll keep doing it. Excellent. Hi, Dali. You are Malawian watching from Cape Town. If you're watching from Cape Town this Saturday, I'll be on SABC2 Stand Up Africa. Check it out. It's a wonderful show. Okay. Anything else? Okay, is my tripod on his side? Why is my tripod on his side? Oh, this is what is called like MacGyvering the situation. I do not have a stand for the microphone. So what I've done is I've got a little camera tripod and turned it into that. Hi, Srikant Shiva. You're from the Malawi Press. Please write a review of this show. You can write a review of this show. No problem at all. You can check out the previous episodes I've done. There's one episode where I did a joke which has gone viral in Malawi. I'm not sure what episode that is, but if you go to Kabeniso Malawi's The Show Must Go On, you'll find that clip is there. That's where I talk about the Malawi politics. So that might be useful to you. Please write a review. Unless you hate me. If you hate me, don't do a review. Good. We're on to the second hand, which will be a shorter little section, right? So I'll just do a few jokes from the second half, and then we will take one final look and wrap up. But this has been a very fun show. So, now, I wanted to talk about laughter, right? I wanted to talk about laughter. I wanted to talk about tears. I wanted to talk about all the different things. And I started thinking about what makes people cry. And then I started thinking, what are the movie scenes that people most cry about? So I asked all of the people who I interviewed, but I also did Google searches. Tear jerkers, movies which make you cry, right? And the ones which came out were things like Life is Beautiful, which is actually my favorite movie. If you've not watched Life is Beautiful, it is magnificent. It did not make me cry. It made me laugh a lot, but I could see how it would make people cry at one particular scene. It is beautiful, magnificent. If you're looking for something to do in Corona, Life is Beautiful. Will not let you down, right? Sophie's Choice, Schindler's List, The Notebook, Lord of the Rings. There was a bunch of them. Now look, this is what I found out. Most of the ones which give people tear jerkers were in three categories. Category number one was Nazi movies, right? Concentration camps, things like that. Of course, it's horrific things that humans are doing to other humans. Of course, it makes you cry, right? That's why on this list, Sophie's Choice, Life is Beautiful, Schindler's List, of course it makes people cry. I fully understand. Of course it's going to make you cry. Also, in this category, I'll just say all atrocity movies. So if you could throw Hotel Rwanda in there, you could throw this movie, I've forgotten the name, but it takes place in the Serbian ethnic cleansing. So any of these things which are about human atrocity, people crying, we expect that. Of course, that's going to make you cry because it's horrific, right? Second category, I understand too, which is romantic people die at the end movies. Now, I don't want to tell you the movies because I'll be giving it away, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. There are lots of romantic movies where two people fall in love. They fall in love, and then in the middle of the movie, one of them gets sick, and the rest of the movie is the other one taking care of them, and then they die, right? Or often they try to trick you, and so the person who's taking care of the person who's sick is the one who dies in a bus accident or something like that. It's a formula. It works. Gets people crying. I understand why it makes people cry. The only thing I want to bring up is I remember dating somebody who thought I was a savage because I like action movies, right? Because she felt action movies is, so much death, right? You're seeing hundreds of people die. You are soulless. You are soulless. Well, I would like to say to women like this woman I was dating that actually you are the evil one. Because think about it. When I'm watching something like John Wick, he's killing loads of people, but they're random people. They have no personality. We don't know who they are. He might as well just be killing robots, right? We know nothing about them. We have no attachment to them. So we're just watching these nobodies die. And the movies you like to watch, they make us like somebody. They create this lovely, beautiful human being, and then they make them fall in love. So we're fully invested in who they are. We like who they are. And then they slowly die for the rest of the movie. They make that lovable character get ill and die. Which is more sadistic, Like John Wick killing 100 negative things, or this movie where this lovely human being, or a child. It's often a child who gets sick and dies to make you cry. Which is really sadistic. I'd like to argue that you're the sadistic one because the movies you like are just watching nice people die. I'm watching villains get killed beautifully with martial arts. Yes. So, that is the second category, right? The second category is movies where somebody dies in a romantic situation or a child dies who's loved by parents. Those make sense. But when you look at all the top 10 tearjerker movies. The third category does not make sense. Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Who are these people crying in fantasy movies? Right? With wizards and dragons. Who are we crying? Also, the heroes always win. The only person I understand crying in Lord of the Rings is Sauron when they kicked his ass. Who are you people who cry during Lord of the Rings? If any of you are watching, please put it in the comments because I don't understand. Right? Harry Potter, why are we crying? Okay, there was one sad moment in Prison of Azkaban where maybe I could see you crying. But all the rest, what are you crying about? Were you like, oh my gosh, the way they said... Oh, this joke would have been funnier if I could remember a magic word. The way they said Lumos was really tear-jerking. It made me weep. Oh my God, the light came off the top of his hand. Oh no. Oh, Dobby is free. I'm crying because Dobby is free. Cat, get some self-respect. Why are you crying over these things? I don't understand, but if you've cried over it, maybe there's some sad moments I did not realize. Or maybe it was tears of celebration. But that one I found very funny because I understand the Nazi movies. I understand the romantic movies, but I did not expect the fantasy movie tears welling up. People cried during Hunger Games. Maybe my hungry friend in the first half, she's the one who cried during Hunger Games. Then the next thing I do want to talk to you about is my favorite, my very, very favorite kind of crying is tears of laughter. Right? Now, of course, I'm a comedian. I love watching people tear up and tears. When people are laughing so much, they're shaking and then they start crying. That's my favorite thing to see in the audience. I love it. I even have a joke, which I do. The first time I did it, I improvised it. Now I just do it. Right, and this is what often happens. It happens, it works, you improvise it, then you do it every time that happens. So now if specifically a white woman in the front row is weeping, I have a joke for every time that happens, right? And it happens often enough that I get to use this joke. If a white woman in the front row of my show is laughing and tears of laughter, I say, wow, you're crying? Usually when I make a white woman cry, a brown baby is involved. And it always gets a big laugh. Always gets a very big laugh. It's playing on a stereotype, but it works very well. Right? But that's my favorite thing. People crying with tears. And I even still have this fond memory of making my mom laugh with tears. And it's really funny because it wasn't even with very clever... My mom doesn't get most of my jokes, but I remember once we were having a conversation and she was trying to talk about cows who have been genetically modified, like, GMO cows, which have been genetically modified. But the word she was looking for was genetically modified, but she said bionic cows, right? And I started laughing and I explained to her that a bionic cow would actually be a robot cow, which was walking around and chomping the grass. And she just started laughing so much that she had accidentally said bionic cow, that she was laughing and there were tears of laughter coming out. And that's one of my favorite memories, laughing about the bionic cow. And then the other time was when she actually laughed at a bit of stand-up of mine, which was wonderful. Because again, she doesn't get most of my jokes, so she just kind of watches it and is more watching the crowd. But I did a crowd about how men don't hug, right? Men don't hug. We're so repressed we don't hug. I saw one man hug. The only time it's okay for men to hug another man and not be judged is when they're watching sports. And after the goal, it's okay, you can hug your mate. So when my girlfriend broke up with me, I invited my friends over to watch a game. And I was staring at the screen going, somebody score, yes, hold me. And that silly joke of all my jokes, not my cleverest joke, made my mom laugh so much because she loved the idea of pretending to want to watch football just for the hugging. So those are my favorite two because they made her laugh so much. So I love tears of laughter. And pretty much that's all I've got for you today, right? I wanted to leave you on why do we cry? Why do we cry? And I think this is the thing is crying is a very healthy thing to do, right? It's something that that makes everybody I spoke to said it helps, right? This is part of why I wish I could cry because some days I'm struggling in all of this corona, right? And if it's an outlet that works for you, let it out. Don't be ashamed, right? A lot of people cry, but only in private. It's okay to cry. I don't know why we look down on crying, even though I have judged people crying. I was wrong to. Crying is an amazing thing. It lets you release emotions. It helps you cope with things. But at the same time, if you're like me and you can't cry, don't judge yourself, right? You are what you are. And maybe not crying got you where you are. Maybe it was a survival tool. I think too often we are hard to criticize ourselves for stuff which may have been the only thing that got us through, right? And pretty much all I would say is, if you are struggling, do whatever it takes to struggle. Be honest with people. If you need to cry in the presence of others, let them know. If you need to call people when you've been crying, people are there listening. If you don't have any friends you can call someone like the Samaritans. This is a very odd world we're living in this post-corona, post-COVID world. And whatever coping mechanisms we have, we need them. Don't judge others for having them. And this has been the Coronacast comedy show every night. If you enjoy the show, you want to support it, there's a Patreon. You can see the details up there. There is a Ko-fi. You can see the details up there. Either way, I'll be here broadcasting every night. I will see you all. Stay safe and have a very wonderful evening. This has been Delisa Chaponda.